Yes, we all had a good laugh when it came to light that RFK Jr. had literal brainworms. But did you know that those brainworms are actually legally relevant?
Have you the brainworms?
Yes, brainworms. They're not just political ad hominems anymore. Yes, the 2024 presidential election is here. Option 1 is a very old man who mixes up his words. Option 2 is an almost as old man who falls asleep in court. And option 3 is a Kennedy with a literal brainworm. Good luck, America. I'm out of here. But at least what I find interesting about this confession of actual, literal brainworms is that it was part of a larger legal strategy. During a deposition taken during his 2012 divorce, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. claimed to have several mental health problems, including a brain parasite. Yes, those nematoda were legally relevant to his divorce, and we're gonna discover why. The story is even wilder because Kennedy claimed to have other brain damage that was also legally relevant. While now he is contrasting himself with other presidential candidates, claiming to be a health nut who can solve all of America's health crises. His story is that his opponents are old men. Fact check, true. Whereas he's a vigorous youngster who can do shirtless push-ups. But Kennedy, who is a sprightly septuagenarian, said under oath that he has brain damage. Now, as you may know, Robert Kennedy Jr. is one of 11 children born to Robert Kennedy and Ethel Skakel. RFK Sr. was a senator and attorney general who was murdered while running for president in 1968. Robert Jr. is a lawyer who was running for president as an independent. Kennedy is currently best known for claiming that COVID vaccines kill people, but at the time of his divorce, he had been a successful environmental lawyer for more than 2 decades. For example, in 2007, he secured a $396 million jury verdict against DuPont for polluting the water at a zinc smelting plant in Spelter, West Virginia. And today we're talking about his second marriage, which ended in divorce in 2012. Kennedy married Mary Richardson, and the couple had 4 children, but things disintegrated and Kennedy filed for divorce. Now, the key issue in the divorce was how much money RFK Jr. had and whether he still had the ability to win big class action cases in the future. Now, if you haven't been through a divorce, congratulations, because even amicable divorces are hard. But most of the time, asset distribution is relatively straightforward, even if the spouses no longer get along. That's because in most states, asset division is guided by statute. In community property states, all assets and debts acquired during the marriage are owned equally by both spouses. Typically, they're divided 50-50, and in equitable distribution states, the court considers many factors to come up with a fair division of assets, including things like each person's finances, what each contributed during the marriage, and what they'll need in the future. Not surprisingly, when a family has more assets, the divorce can be even more contentious. And often, like a civil suit, a divorce case can have a discovery stage where each party engages in fact-finding. And here, both spouses exchange information about their financial status and ask for information from the other, including how much money each spouse expects to earn in the future. Divorce discovery is similar to discovery in other kinds of civil litigation. The parties exchange records and take depositions. And that's how RFK Jr. found himself explaining that his future earning capacity would be drastically reduced because of his brain parasites, among other injuries. Obviously, Kennedy and his family were highly invested in stopping Mary Richardson Kennedy from getting too much of the family fortune. Eventually, Kennedy had to give deposition testimony about his net worth and his ability to work. At that point, Kennedy had worked for the National Resource Defense Council and was in private practice, focusing on class action litigation. And according to the New York Times, Kennedy testified that he'd been having some memory loss, so he went in for a brain scan. A surgeon apparently told Kennedy that his issue was, quote, caused by a worm that got into my brain and ate a portion of it and then died.
Wow! Worms?
Parasite had given him brain fog, and because of that, he argued his earning power was hampered. The New York Times quotes Kennedy as saying, quote, I have cognitive problems, clearly I have short-term memory loss, and I have longer-term memory loss that affects me. So what did this mean for the divorce? Well, the issue was never resolved because Mary Richardson died by suicide before the divorce was finalized. Now, I'm sure everyone following along at home is wondering just how much was at stake. Well, it's hard to say exactly how much money was at stake in this particular divorce. Kennedy shares in the Kennedy family trusts, which were established in 1926. Grandfather Joe Kennedy made his money in stocks and real estate. The Kennedy trusts are now worth at least $1 billion, but because there are so many Kennedy descendants, Robert probably only has a small interest in those trusts. Still, the Kennedy family was reportedly very involved in bullying Mary Richardson to settle for less money. A 2015 book by Jeffrey Oppenheimer claimed Kennedy's sister, quote, Carrie was said to have been putting intense pressure on Mary that night and in the weeks before to sign Bobby's divorce settlement agreement, described as a very bitter, harsh, and draconian proposal, limiting Mary's custody of her children and slashing her financial support. Mary's friends told Oppenheimer that, quote, Carrie had hammered constantly at Mary to sign Bobby's settlement and told her, there's not an endless pool of money, you're making everybody broke. Now, obviously, we don't know what really happened between Mary and members of the clan Kennedy. However, we do know that 12 years later, Carrie and the rest of Robert's siblings endorsed President Biden. And Forbes estimates that Kennedy's personal net worth is currently about $15 million. And Kennedy's divorce is not the only one that might be relevant to the presidential campaign. Kennedy is not self-funding his presidential campaign. His running mate, Nicole Shanahan, is fronting those costs. Shanahan is a patent lawyer, but she made the bulk of her fortune through 2 great divorce settlements. Her first husband, Jeremy Krantz, is a venture capitalist. Her second husband was Google co-founder Sergey Brin. And although the two had a prenuptial agreement limiting her settlement to $1 million, Shanahan claimed she signed it under duress. And when the divorce went through arbitration, she wound up walking away with around, quote, 2.6 million Alphabet Class B shares from Brin, worth $390 million in March 2024, and possibly received an additional equal amount of Class C shares. So sometimes divorce is more lucrative than patent law. So what does RFK Jr. say about all this now? Well, first of all, he tells a slightly different story from how he was diagnosed. When he was under oath in the deposition, he testified that several neurologists originally believed he had a brain tumor after discovering a dark spot in his scans. He was about to get surgery when at the last moment, he received a call from a doctor at New York Presbyterian Hospital who believed that Kennedy had a dead parasite in his head. Now Kennedy says he was actually picking up images of his scans at Columbia Presbyterian in New York the day before flying to North Carolina. That's when he met this, quote, young Irish doctor who was a neurosurgeon who was sitting in the room, and he and I started talking with each other. The doctor then asked to see his scans and, quote, they put them up on the light board, and he looked at it for a long, long time, and then he said, I don't think you earned a surgery. Worms. But what about those cognitive problems? Well, in addition to the parasite, Kennedy testified that he had mercury poisoning from eating too much fish, and that it impacted his memory and cognitive abilities. Now, in fairness, Kennedy has taken these revelations in stride and in good humor, tweeting that, quote, I offered to eat 5 more brain worms and still beat President Trump and President Biden in a debate. I feel confident in the result even with a 6-worm handicap. And the campaign issued a statement, quote, Mr. Kennedy traveled extensively in Africa, South America, and Asia in his work as an environmental advocate, and in one of those locations contracted a parasite. The issue was resolved more than 10 years ago, and he is in robust physical and mental health. Questioning Mr. Kennedy's health is a hilarious suggestion given his competition. But even if you don't have brain worms, it can feel like you do if you have too many drinks at a time. But luckily, today's sponsor, ZBiotics, can help. Now, I recently had a very large birthday, and lately it seems like I don't bounce back from a night out like I used to. I either have a great night or a great morning, but not both. But that was until I started drinking ZBiotics. Now, I must admit, I was extremely skeptical about ZBiotics. There is so much nonsense BS on the internet. At worst, people hawk colloidal silver, and at best, they promote harmless supplements. But when a friend said that ZBiotics actually works, I decided to try it out for myself before a Friday night out with friends. I had a tennis match the next morning, so I really needed to be feeling my best. I had a ZBiotics before my first drink. The next morning, I felt fantastic. That's because ZBiotics is the first genetically engineered probiotic designed to tackle rough mornings after drinking. And here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut called acetaldehyde. It's this byproduct, generally not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. But ZBiotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Now, every time I have a ZBiotics before a few drinks, I notice a huge difference the next day. Even after a night out, the next day I can confidently plan on working out or just working without worry. I have to tell you, I'm honestly shocked that it works. Now, obviously it's not a miracle worker, but I feel so much better than I would without it. And of course, do not drink more than you normally would. This is not a get out of jail free card. But try it out for yourself to see how well it works. You can click on the link below for 15% off at checkout with the code LegalEagle, and ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you are unsatisfied for any reason whatsoever, they will refund your money, no questions asked. So again, give yourself the gift of a good morning and click the link below to get 15% off with the code LegalEagle. After that, click on this link over here for more LegalEagle, or I'll see you in court.